When we hear the phrase impregnable fortress, our imagination automatically conjures up giant stone walls, deep moats filled with water, and massive oak gates. But are you ready for the shocking truth about how the seemingly ordinary nomadic camps of the Great Plains were transformed into deadly and utterly impregnable bastions without a single stone? For many years, haughty European explorers and military generals regarded the layout of Native American dwellings as a chaotic, meaningless jumble of tents. They looked down on these camps from the heights of their arrogance and saw only the primitive way of life of nomads who had simply set up camp wherever they pleased. However, the latest detailed analysis of the architecture of these settlements strips away the facade and reveals a completely different, unsettling picture of the strictest geometric precision. It turns out this wasn't chaos at all, but a brilliantly designed tactical trap. Every detail of the layout, the distance between the yurts, and even the orientation of the entrances was engineered to anticipate the movements of any armed intruder. Be sure to watch this video all the way to the very last second, because today we're going to crack this ancient military code. You'll learn how the strict order of the dwellings created invisible crossfire zones and completely deprived the enemy of even the slightest chance of a successful attack during the first most critical minutes of battle. And in the middle of the video, I'll show you one ingenious spatial trick that forced attacking cavalry to literally drive themselves into a deadly maze. Give it a like in advance. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and let's dive into the analysis of the perfect nomadic fortress. I'll reveal the best-kept secret of camp layout, one that completely changes our understanding of defense. The tradition of positioning dwellings with their entrances facing the rising sun had a profound tactical purpose. Early in the morning, the first rays of light shone directly through the open flaps of the teepee. This allowed the inhabitants to instantly orient themselves upon waking. An outside observer or attacker, however, would be completely blinded by the bright sun at that moment. This optical barrier worked flawlessly during the most critical hours of the morning. The blinding effect created ideal conditions for a sudden counterattack by the camp's defenders. Attackers approaching from the direction of the rising sun were forced to squint and lost clarity of vision. They could not make out small details inside the dark doorway. The defenders, however, were in deep shadow and could clearly see every figure against the bright horizon. The advantage of visibility lay entirely with the settlement's defenders. This deprived the enemy of the ability to assess the defenders' true strength. If the attack came from the west, the situation was also not in the visitors' favor. The thick rear walls of the teepee formed a solid, impenetrable barrier without a single weak spot. Penetrating the thick bison hide was practically impossible without making a loud noise. Any attempt to cut through the dense material immediately gave away the intruder's position. The defenders inside had enough time to prepare a proper welcome for the uninvited guest. The enemy lost the element of surprise even before it could land its first blow. The architecture of the entrance itself consisted of a narrow opening that had to be navigated one at a time. It was impossible to storm inside as a group, which deprived the enemy of a numerical advantage in the first few seconds. The attacker was forced to crouch, losing his balance and visual contact with the interior. At that moment, he became the most vulnerable target for the defender. This single rule turned every house into an independent defensive line. The relative positioning of all the entrances in the camp created a unified surveillance system. Standing at their own doorsteps, everyone could see the area in front of neighboring dwellings. No blind spot went unnoticed by at least one person. If strangers appeared, the signal was transmitted from entrance to entrance almost instantly. This living chain of surveillance worked more effectively than any watchtowers. The security network functioned continuously thanks to its proper geometry. The geometry of the eastern entrance also dictated the internal arrangement of all household items. The central space always remained clear for quick movement. No object could block the path of a person rushing to the exit or preparing for defense. This strict order was maintained daily and allowed for no exceptions. In a critical situation, such discipline saved precious fractions of a second. Safety depended on flawless adherence to spatial norms. It is important to understand that this standard applied to all dwellings without exception. Whether it was a chieftain's teepee or a common warrior's home, The spatial orientation remained unchanged. This deprived the enemy of the ability to quickly identify key targets based on the appearance of the structures. All dwellings looked equally impregnable from three directions. Finding the right entrance took too much time in the heat of battle. The standardization of architecture served as an excellent means of concealing important figures. A uniform standard for the placement of entrances formed a unique pattern for the entire settlement. This pattern was incomprehensible to an outsider, but completely transparent to every local resident. We'd love to hear your thoughts on such architectural solutions. What do you think of this geometric approach to the layout of a typical settlement? Write about it in the comments and be sure to subscribe to our channel. What I'm about to show you is banned in 12 countries, as it's the perfect strategy for manipulating space. The distance of exactly 15 steps between neighboring teepee was neither a coincidence nor a matter of aesthetics. This precise distance created the perfect balance between building density and freedom of movement. Narrower passages would have caused a stampede among the defenders themselves in the event of a sudden alarm. Wider streets would have allowed the enemy to move in a wide formation. The carefully calculated distance determined the outcome of many tactical maneuvers. 15 paces was exactly the distance that could be shot through with maximum accuracy. Any enemy entering this corridor came under crossfire from two adjacent dwellings. At the same time, the defenders did not need to stick their heads out very far. They could control this sector directly from the narrow doorway. The corridor became an insurmountable barrier for any unit. This width became the gold standard for security. During the day, this distance ensured optimal lighting of every patch of ground. No long, dense shadows formed between the buildings in which one could hide. Sunlight evenly flooded the passageways, depriving the enemy of the ability to approach unnoticed. The absence of hidden areas made it impossible to organize a surprise ambush within the settlement itself. Every movement was plain to see. The open space deprived the aggressor of the advantage of concealment. If the enemy tried to use fire to attack, a distance of 15 paces proved life-saving. Sparks and tongues of flame could not easily spread from one building to another. The fire remained localized and did not escalate into a catastrophe for the entire settlement. The defenders gained time to calmly neutralize the threat without panic or chaos. The strict geometry functioned as a natural fire break. Safety was ensured solely by the precise calculation of empty space. This layout allowed for the rapid erection of temporary barricades if necessary. Within minutes, the space between two buildings could be blocked with carts or poles. The camp was divided into numerous isolated sectors, each of which became a separate line of defense. An enemy that broke through the first line immediately ran into the next wall. Advancing deeper into such a settlement required an enormous expenditure of energy and time. The fortifications were created literally out of thin air and from materials at hand. The 15-step geometry required exceptional precision with every new camp setup. This rule was passed down by word of mouth and observed with iron discipline. No one had the right to place their home closer to or farther from the established standard. Violating this distance was perceived as a threat to the safety of the entire community. The standardization of space was the key to the survival of an entire people. Every dwelling was part of a vast architectural mechanism. In the next chapter, you will learn how an ordinary hidden hearth was transformed into a tool of optical illusion. You will see how light and shadow can deceive even the most experienced tracker. An enemy entering this artificial labyrinth instantly realized their helplessness in the face of strict geometry. These tricks allowed indigenous peoples to maintain control of the situation, even at night. Why do you think the regular armies of that time did not use a similar system of circular labyrinths when planning their defensive redoubts? The secret that people pay thousands for lies in the proper management of light and shadow. Building a fire has always been the main vulnerability of any nighttime settlement. A bright flame is visible for many kilometers. It attracts attention and gives away positions. That is why the Lakota used a unique technique of building fires exclusively in deep pits. This method concealed direct light, leaving only a soft glow invisible from a distance. Safety was achieved by burying the light source underground. Constructing such a hearth required precise calculations of the depth and width of the earthen pit. The fire burned deep below ground level, completely concealing the flames from outside observers. No high sparks rose above the edge of the pit that could reveal the camp's location. At the same time, The heat was concentrated at the bottom and evenly warmed the ground around it. The dwelling received the necessary heat without the slightest risk of being discovered. This engineering approach to daily life is striking in its effectiveness. The hidden heat source allowed for absolute silence inside the settlement. The wood in such a hearth did not crackle as loudly as in an open fire. The sound was absorbed by the earthen walls of the pit, never escaping beyond the confines of the dwelling. This silence was critical for the work of the auditory sentries on the outskirts. No extraneous noise interfered with monitoring the perimeter. Hearing became the primary tool for night patrols of the territory. In the event of a sudden alarm, the hidden hearth did not become a trap for the inhabitants. It was impossible to accidentally kick it over in the dark. The earthen walls reliably held the coals inside, preventing a fire within the dwelling. The space remained safe for the defenders to move quickly and prepare for defense. Not a single spark could disrupt the precise sequence of actions. Safety during internal movements was maintained at the highest level. The attackers, having burst into the teepee, were met with complete darkness and disorientation. They expected to see the familiar fire in the center, around which they could organize their battle tactics. Instead, they stumbled upon a flat surface concealing red-hot coals. The enemy lost their spatial orientation, which instantly threw them off balance. The ingenious simplicity of this method worked flawlessly. The invisible barrier proved more effective than any visible traps. Control over light was not merely a domestic habit, but the strictest of military laws. Violation of the rule of hidden fire was met with severe punishment from the elders and warriors. From an early age, every resident learned that carelessness with a fire could cost everyone their lives. This discipline fostered a unique culture of caution and constant vigilance. The camp functioned as a single, perfectly tuned mechanism of invisibility. Individual responsibility became the foundation of collective safety. The technology of the pit fire proves that true mastery lies in the ability to use the earth itself. This principle transformed an ordinary heat source into a strategic advantage. If you enjoyed this unique fact about managing light during nighttime camouflage, be sure to like this video. Your support helps us uncover even more unique historical details. Share this video with your friends so we can marvel together at the wisdom of nomadic peoples. What if everything you were taught is outdated? The traditional perception of the north side as the least protected is fundamentally incorrect when analyzing Lakota camps. It was on the north side that a massive living barrier of hundreds of vehicles and supplies was located. This massive barrier formed an insurmountable physical and acoustic barrier for any attacker approaching from that direction. Breaking through this dense wall unnoticed was absolutely impossible. The layout of the space forced the enemy to abandon direct routes. The north wind, often carrying cold, posed a natural threat to any settlement. Placing the main resource on this side solved two tactical problems at once. First, the massive barrier broke the gusts of cold wind, protecting the dwellings themselves. Second, any sound from the enemy's side was immediately carried by the wind straight to the sentries. This system functioned as an ideal early warning radar. Natural phenomena became part of the settlement's defensive strategy. The camp's layout forced the enemy to shift east or west in search of an easier path, but it was precisely there that the defenders' main forces in the street's precise geometry awaited them. The northern barrier served as a guiding wall, herding the enemy into the desired sector. This is a classic example of how architecture dictates the terms of battle. The enemy was deprived of the freedom to choose the direction of its attack. Defense became a process of actively managing the aggressor's actions. In the event of a massive offensive, the northern zone could easily be transformed into a line of defense. The defenders used massive barriers as cover for their defensive operations. From there, it was convenient to control the approaches while remaining completely out of the enemy's reach. This zone became an impregnable bastion that was impossible to bypass due to the terrain's features. The camp turned into a fortress with multi-level defenses. Every meter of ground was calculated with mathematical precision. Maintaining order in the northern sector was a separate task for the guards. The most experienced sentries, who knew every detail of this barrier, were always stationed here. They patrolled the territory along strictly defined routes, leaving no blind spots. Their task was not to be the first to engage in combat, but to sound the alarm in time. This patrol system operated flawlessly at all hours of the day and night. The human factor was reduced to the strict execution of instructions. It is important to note that the dimensions of this barrier could vary depending on the size of the camp. The larger the settlement, the wider and denser the northern barrier became. This ensured proportional protection for any number of residents. The enemy could never calculate the thickness of this barrier in advance. This uncertainty served as an additional demoralizing factor for the attackers. The system's flexibility allowed it to be adapted to threats of any scale. The genius of this solution lies in the fact that the defense was built from what was always at hand. No one wasted additional resources on constructing separate defensive ramparts. The vehicles and supplies themselves served a dual purpose in daily life. In the next chapter, you'll learn how the strict ergonomics of the interior living space saved the defenders precious seconds in the dark. Did you know that such large-scale barriers were used to manipulate the enemy's route? The organization of the dwelling's interior space was governed by strict laws of ergonomics and safety. The most important rule was the consistent placement of all defensive equipment to the right of the sleeping area. This was not merely a cultural tradition, it was a carefully calibrated tactical maneuver. In the darkness of night, a person must act on muscle memory without hesitation. The right side ensured the fastest and most natural access to equipment. Rationality took precedence over any other practical considerations. When a warrior was jolted awake by an alarm, his right hand would automatically reach for the right spot. He didn't need to search for his tools with his eyes in the dark or grope around the floor with his hands. Every movement had been drilled to the point of automaticity through thousands of repetitions in peacetime. A moment's delay in finding equipment could cost control of the situation. Therefore, the order of things never changed, even during short stops. The fixed arrangement of objects guaranteed an instant reaction to a threat. This strict order applied not only to defensive equipment, but also to all everyday items. The left side was traditionally reserved for storing supplies, clothing, and everyday tools. This division eliminated the possibility of accidental confusion in a critical situation. A defender would never mistake a sack of grain for the necessary item in the dark. Rational zoning of the space was the key to the survival of the entire group. The order inside the teepee was just as unbreakable as it was outside. The arrangement of objects on the right also allowed the defender to remain in the shadows while preparing to repel an attack. Moving only his right hand, he did not block the faint glow from the hearth in the pit. His silhouette remained invisible to an attacker trying to peer inside the teepee. This created an element of surprise when the defender sprang into action. The enemy could not tell until the very last moment whether the host was ready for the encounter. The spatial layout worked to maintain this visual advantage. The younger generation was accustomed to this strict order of things from an early age. Their own tools were always arranged according to the same rules, forming proper habits. Such training ensured that new defenders would act just as effectively and flawlessly. Discipline in the small details shaped the overall culture of safety for the entire settlement. No object could be left in the middle of a passageway or placed in the wrong spot. This culture of safety was passed down as a vital tradition. The right side rule also accounted for possible damage to the dwelling itself during an attack. If the enemy cut through the bison hide on the left side, the defensive equipment remained safe on the opposite side. A defender could quickly shift and take up an advantageous position to repel the threat. Spreading out storage areas reduced the risk of losing all vital resources at once. Every aspect of daily life was dictated by the harsh logic of survival. The tipi's layout accounted for all possible scenarios of intrusion. It is important to understand that in the cramped conditions of the teepee, any disorder became a critical mistake. Scattered items could cause a loss of control over the space at the most inopportune moment. Therefore, maintaining perfect cleanliness and order was the responsibility of every resident. The space was organized to ensure maximum maneuverability. This transformed an ordinary tent into a highly efficient module. The organization of the interior space was governed by strict laws of logistics. The combination of all these architectural and ergonomic rules created a system of incredible strength. The outer labyrinth held back the enemy, while the internal organization allowed the defenders to act with lightning speed. This system did not require the constant presence of numerous guards or the construction of stone walls. It relied on strict geometry, discipline, and impeccable knowledge of the space. In the following chapters, we will examine how this system performed in the context of a real nighttime clash. An experiment that did not go according to plan often becomes history's best lesson. A specific night attack by a hostile tribe on a Lakota camp serves as a perfect illustration of how these rules worked. The attackers planned to quickly suppress resistance by exploiting the element of surprise and their numerical superiority. They carefully chose a moonless night to conceal their approach to the settlement as much as possible. Their plan relied on the assumption that the sleeping camp would be completely defenseless against a swift attack. The aggressor's strategy was based on a stereotypical perception of a nomadic camp. Approaching from the east, the enemies found themselves completely disoriented. They did not see the familiar tall bonfires that would have allowed them to gauge the density of the settlement. Before them lay a solid black wall in which it was impossible to distinguish individual structures. The lack of visual landmarks forced them to slow their pace and move by feel. Their confidence in a quick victory gave way to anxiety and uncertainty about their actions. The invisibility of the settlement dealt the first psychological blow. Meanwhile, inside the camp, the alarm was already being relayed from entrance to entrance. A human chain of sentries instantly alerted all sectors to the approaching threat without a single loud shout. The defenders woke up in complete darkness and acted strictly according to a well-rehearsed protocol. Their hands automatically found the necessary items on the right side without wasting a single second searching. The camp was ready for the encounter, remaining absolutely silent. Discipline ensured an advantage in reaction speed. The attackers finally entered the first corridors between the tipis, expecting a quick resolution. But instead of open spaces, they found themselves squeezed into narrow passages exactly 15 paces wide. The space forced them to break up their tight formation into small, unconnected groups. Control of the unit was immediately lost in these winding streets. Commanders could not shout to their subordinates without giving away their position. The unit's structure crumbled under the pressure of the labyrinth's geometry. The narrow arteries of the labyrinth thwarted any attempt to organize a massive assault on individual dwellings. The enemies were forced to move in single file, becoming perfect targets for the defenders. They constantly ran into dead ends or turned into sectors that led them away from the center. The camp's layout literally sucked them in, scattering their forces across a vast area. Every new step only worsened their situation. The plan for a rapid penetration turned out to be a fatal mistake. The attackers tried to peer inside the dwellings to assess the situation, but the deep pits provided insufficient light to see the interior. The enemies saw only impenetrable darkness, from which a counterattack could come at any moment. This uncertainty paralyzed their will and forced them to make mistakes. They stood on the moonlit streets, completely blind to the dark doorways. The contrast in light worked entirely against them. Just a few minutes after the attack began, the attackers completely lost the initiative. They transformed from aggressors into lost victims of their own ill-conceived plan. The Lakota's strict discipline countered the enemy's chaos with perfect order and geometry. The defenders didn't even have to leave their homes to neutralize the threat. The architecture did all the hard work for them. The settlement's invisible shield proved stronger than any armor. The enemy detachment found itself trapped, not by deep moats, but by simple rules for arranging tents. Their original plan was shattered in the very first minutes of the clash. In the next chapter, you will learn exactly how the defenders used the advantages of narrow corridors to finally rout the lost detachment. Those moments proved decisive for the outcome of the entire night's confrontation. Do you think modern tactical units could operate effectively in such an unpredictable labyrinth without the use of sophisticated electronics? Once inside the labyrinth, the attackers faced the insurmountable problem of the 15-step rule. Each group of enemies, trapped between the walls of the teepee, came under crossfire from the defenders. The locals, who knew their own streets like the back of their hands, began methodically pushing the enemy back from the center. They avoided open confrontation, preferring to operate from secure cover. The 15-step distance allowed them to control every meter of space without risking their own safety. The enemy was deprived of the ability to respond in kind. The defenders used the eastern entrances as ideal embrasures to defend their sectors. Enemies moving through the streets were clearly visible against the lighter night sky. The defenders, however, remained in the deep shadows of their homes, completely invisible to the enemy. This asymmetry of visibility created panic among the attackers. who did not understand where the threat was coming from. They tried to take cover behind the bends of the alleys, but every turn exposed them to a new line of sight. The trap snapped shut with every new step. The local warriors, on the other hand, used sound to coordinate their actions with striking precision. They exchanged quiet signals that were relayed through a human chain of lookouts. This allowed them to instantly shift their attention to the most dangerous sections of the labyrinth. The enemy constantly encountered organized resistance where, a second ago, there had been nothing. This mobility of the defenders created the illusion of their overwhelming numerical superiority. The speed of information transmission within the camp was phenomenal. The scattered groups of attackers began to realize the hopelessness of their situation in this architectural trap. They could not unite, could not advance, and could not retreat safely. Their every step was monitored by the invisible masters of the situation from the dark openings of the eastern doors. Panic gradually supplanted their fighting spirit, forcing the enemies to make fatal mistakes. They began to rush about the passageways, becoming even more vulnerable. The psychological pressure proved more devastating than the physical confrontation. Under these conditions, the rule of keeping equipment on the right side played a decisive role. The defenders could continuously monitor the situation without being distracted by the search for new tools. Their movements were precise, measured, and required no additional light sources. They operated as a single, well-oiled machine in conditions of zero visibility. This efficiency saved seconds that added up to minutes of absolute advantage. The standardization of daily life became a factor in tactical dominance. The fires hidden in pits continued to serve their camouflage function until the very end. Even when the attackers managed to peer inside the teepee, they saw nothing there but pitch darkness. The absence of familiar landmarks in the form of bright bonfires completely shattered their plans. They felt blind in a world where every local resident possessed perfect vision. This psychological strain proved unbearable for most enemy warriors. Darkness became an insurmountable barrier to their minds. The entire architecture of the settlement was designed to deprive the aggressor of any advantage. Their numerical superiority dissolved in the narrow passages, and the element of surprise shattered against the northern barrier. The layout of the space dictated its own terms, turning the aggressors into helpless hostages of the situation. No amount of personal bravery could compensate for the total superiority of the geometrically precise defense. The camp proved its absolute impregnability in the face of a serious threat. This system was created to completely neutralize any incursions. The outcome of this confrontation was predetermined even at the stage of establishing the first dwelling in the steppe. The attackers were forced to retreat hastily, never reaching the central sectors of the settlement. Their plans suffered a crushing defeat thanks to 5 simple yet ingenious rules. The Lakota defended their home without engaging in direct armed conflict. That night marked the triumph of architectural ingenuity over the brute force of the attackers. Intelligence and order achieved an unconditional victory over chaos. The enemy's retreat from the labyrinth turned into a separate test of their endurance. Trapped between rows of teepees, they could not simply turn around and leave the area directly. They had to make their way back through the same winding streets, constantly expecting a response. Fear of the invisible defenders forced them to move chaotically, getting in each other's way. A space 15 paces wide now seemed to them an insurmountably cramped area. Exiting the camp proved just as difficult as entering it. The Lakota defenders did not seek to pursue the enemy beyond the limits of their settlement. Their main task was to drive the threat back beyond the perimeter of the northern barriers and eastern lines. They continued to monitor the passages, keeping a close watch on the retreating enemy from the dark doorways. Not a single enemy warrior managed to carry away valuable information about the camp's layout. For them, this place remained a dark and frightening mystery. The secrets of the defensive system remained hidden from prying eyes. The hearths in the earthen pits had been keeping their owners warm all this time. Once the threat had passed, the residents did not need to light new fires and give away the camp's location. They simply returned to their shelters, where a comfortable temperature awaited them. This allowed the settlement to quickly restore calm and readiness for a possible repeat attack. The energy efficiency of such a heating system proved its worth in practice. Not a single extra resource was wasted that night. The right-hand placement of the equipment allowed the defenders to disarm just as quickly as they had armed themselves. all items returned to their proper places in literally a matter of seconds. Order in the dwellings was restored instantly, without fuss or lengthy searches in the dark. The ergonomics of the space worked both ways, providing a perfect balance between a state of readiness and rest. This return to normal life was swift and organized. Daily discipline was restored the moment the alarm was lifted. Neighboring tribes quickly learned of the failure of this large-scale night operation. Rumors of the impregnability of the Lakota camp spread faster than the wind, giving them a fearsome reputation. Few dared to repeat such a mistake and infiltrate a settlement organized according to such rules. Geometry became the best means of curbing aggression across the vast expanses of the Great Plains. Respect for this people's architectural genius only grew. Their reputation became an additional, invisible shield for the entire tribe. For the inhabitants themselves, this experience became an additional incentive to maintain perfect order. No one doubted the necessity of building fire pits only in deep pits. The distance of 15 paces was measured with even greater care at every new campsite. Discipline became an inner need for every member of the community. The tribe's survival depended directly on upholding these basic principles. Everyday actions were imbued with deep meaning and an understanding of their importance. The attackers struggled for a long time to understand why their carefully thought-out plan had failed. They blamed the dark night, faulty reconnaissance, or the interference of outside forces. It was difficult for them to admit that they had been defeated by the simple arrangement of tents and the correct orientation of the entrances. The defenders' technological superiority lay not in their tools, but in their understanding of space. It was a clash of two different approaches to organizing their lives and their defense. Geometric order proved stronger than any spontaneous action. In the end, 5 simple rules formed an invisible shield, surpassing any stone walls in reliability. This shield could not be breached by force or circumvented by cunning. It responded to any enemy action, turning their own efforts against them. The Lakota camp became the standard for mobile defense, unmatched in its ingenious simplicity. These principles have gone down in history as an example of the perfect harmony of form and function. The knowledge of their ancestors ensured safety for many generations to come. After the incident ended, the camp did not sink into complacency or a loss of vigilance. The sentries at the northern barrier redoubled their vigilance, aware of the likelihood of the detachment's return. They listened intently to every rustle carried to them by the north wind. Their position behind the array of vehicles remained the most reliable line of defense for detecting any activity. The settlement's peace was guarded with even greater care than before the attack. The defensive system remained on active alert. Inside the tipis, the residents rested peacefully, knowing that the warning system was working flawlessly. The hearths in the earthen pits continued to give off steady heat, betraying no sign of human presence. The darkness inside the dwellings remained the camp's greatest ally in maintaining its secrecy. Not a single spark disturbed the settlement's perfect camouflage in the nighttime steppe. This state of invisibility was maintained until dawn, without the slightest breach. Comfort and safety existed in inseparable unity. With the arrival of morning, the eastern entrances once again proved their incredible practicality and ingenuity. The first rays of the sun penetrated the dwellings unimpeded, signaling the start of a new day. The blinding light from the east reliably protected the camp from any possible morning surprises from the enemy. Any observer attempting to view the settlement at dawn encountered an insurmountable optical barrier. This natural defense worked every day, regardless of the presence or absence of a threat. The architecture utilized the sun as a daily defensive tool. The ideal order inside the teepee also confirmed the validity of the right-side placement principle. All objects were in their proper places, ensuring the familiar ergonomics of the space. No one experienced any inconvenience when returning to their daily morning routines. Rational zoning proved its effectiveness not only during an alarm, but also in daily life. The boundary between a state of readiness and peaceful routine was blurred thanks to the universality of this rule. Life continued in its familiar, strictly organized rhythm. This nighttime experience served as a vivid lesson for the younger members of the community. They saw with their own eyes how strict planning rules saved the lives of the entire settlement. They understood why the elders are so strict about adhering to every detail when setting up camp. This knowledge was absorbed not through abstract lectures, but through real-life experience of successfully managing the situation. The tradition received powerful confirmation of its relevance in the new circumstances. The continuity of generations was ensured by the visible results of discipline. The genius of the 5 rules lay in their comprehensive impact on any situation. Individually, they were merely convenient everyday solutions or precautions, but together, they formed an impenetrable defense system operating at all levels of perception. Visual control, acoustic security, ergonomics, and spatial disorientation merged into a single mechanism. This mechanism required no complex maintenance and was always in a state of full readiness. The synergy of simple solutions created an invincible structure. It is important to emphasize that this defense system was entirely eco-friendly and did not disrupt the landscape. Nomadic peoples did not build stone forts or dig deep trenches that altered the appearance of the prairies. Their fortress was temporary, mobile, and vanished without a trace when they moved on. They used nature itself and the laws of geometry as their primary building materials. This demonstrates a profound understanding of the environment and adaptation to it. The architecture blended harmoniously into the natural balance. The history of this successful defense is a vivid testament to the triumph of reason over aggression. It shows that true reliability lies not in the number of fortifications, but in the organization of space. The 5 rules of the camp remain an unsurpassed example of tactical architecture. Their legacy continues to inspire admiration among modern researchers of spatial strategies. This harmony of form, function, and discipline deserves deep study and boundless respect. The experience of the past reveals the secrets of ideal defense. Summing up the study of the phenomenon of spatial organization, one cannot help but be struck by the structural perfection of nomadic camps. Architecture here served not merely as a means of organizing daily life, but as the primary defensive shield. Every rule, whether it was orientation by the cardinal directions or precise distances, had a mathematical basis. This system tolerated no errors but guaranteed maximum safety when standards were strictly observed. The nomadic way of life gave rise to a unique form of urban planning, tailored to extreme conditions. The logic of space replaced any physical fortifications. The concept of a shield in this case did not imply the presence of thick armored walls. Emptiness, distance, shadow, and the correct vector of movement served as the shield. These immaterial elements formed a barrier that was far more effective than any physical obstacle. The enemy could not break or penetrate what consisted of space and light itself. It was the highest form of engineering thought, based on minimalism and absolute efficiency. Geometry worked more reliably than stone and wood. The 5 rules worked in perfect synergy, complementing and reinforcing one another at every stage. The eastern entrance was blinding. The 15 steps disrupted the formation. The fire in the pit concealed their presence. The northern barrier provided early warning, and the right flank positioning guaranteed a lightning-fast response from the defenders. The exclusion of even one of these elements would have destroyed the entire fragile harmony of the defensive system. Together, they created an insurmountable labyrinth against any external threat. Each element was an indispensable part of a complex mosaic of security. Modern urban tactics specialists find many relevant ideas in these principles. Managing pedestrian flows, creating visual barriers, and spatial ergonomics remain critical design objectives. The Lakota experience demonstrates that proper planning can neutralize a threat more effectively than direct confrontation. Their methods of working with distance and light can be applied in various security fields. The historical experience of nomadic peoples holds many unsolved spatial secrets. Ancient knowledge is finding new life in modern research. It is important to remember that these rules were developed over centuries through trial and error and rigorous selection. Only those groups that were able to systematize their experience and turn it into an unbreakable law survived. The 5 principles became the quintessence of knowledge about survival in the open and dangerous spaces of the prairies. This was an intellectual legacy valued no less than material resources or foraging skills. Passing this knowledge on to new generations was the primary task of the tribe's elders. Information was the key to the clan's survival. Exploring these details allows us to view the history of the Great Plains from a completely different angle. Behind the romanticized image of the nomad lies a pragmatic and calculating architect of their environment. Their settlements were not a haphazard jumble of tents, but high-tech modular safety complexes. Understanding this fact shatters many stereotypes about the primitiveness of the way of life of the indigenous peoples of North America. They possess deep knowledge in the fields of geometry, acoustics, and the psychology of spatial perception. Their intellectual superiority was expressed in the form of their dwellings. Today, we can only marvel at the elegance of the solutions used to create these camps. In an era of complex electronic security systems, the simplicity of the Lakota's 5 rules seems like a true miracle. They remind us that the most effective solutions are often found in the proper application of the laws of nature. Harmony with the environment has always been the best way to ensure one's safety. This is a lesson that remains relevant at all times and for all cultures. Simplicity and calculation prove stronger than complex technologies. Knowledge of these historical facts enriches our understanding of the diversity of human genius. The architecture of the Lakota camp will forever remain a monument to the triumph of reason, discipline, and perfect calculation. These 5 rules represent not merely a historical curiosity, but a fully fledged philosophy of interaction with the world. They have proven their effectiveness under the harshest conditions, protecting human lives without resorting to brute force. Studying this legacy helps us better understand the universal laws of survival and coexistence. How would you rate the engineering genius of the Great Plains peoples? What other topics related to the history of survival and daily life of the indigenous peoples of North America would you like to see in future videos? Be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new exciting historical investigations.